Today, we are focusing on the man behind M.A.R.S Industries, the Laird of Castle Destro, my favorite Cobra member, and the Lord of War, James McCullen Destro. What's up everyone, James here, and we're continuing our coverage of the Energon universe. More so on the G.I. Joe side of things. We're playing a bit of catch up here when it comes to the G.I. Joe properties. We have to get through this series and the Scarlet miniseries before jumping into the current G.I. Joe run. If you are new here, Destro is the head of M.A.R.S, which stands for Military Armament Research Syndicate. It's a powerful weapon supplier and the largest manufacturer of state-of-the-art weaponry. Destro comes from a long line of Scottish arms dealers and wears a beryllium steel mask that's been passed down from generation to generation as a symbol of pride. His miniseries takes place after the events of the Duke miniseries, where he got introduced and had his first confrontation with Duke. After that, the last time we saw him was in the Cobra Commander miniseries, where the commander was attacking his M.A.R.S facilities and introduced himself in the most badass way to Destro. Destro had accepted the commander's proposed partnership, where he would provide Cobra weapons and the commander would provide him Energon. I'll have the link to both playlists below the like button, in the pinned comment below, and at the end of this video. So this series opens in the Republic of Darklonia during a protest. Right off the bat, we learn the Prime Minister of Darklonia is not a good guy, because he calls the Darklonians' somewhat peaceful protests an insurgency and orders for the more violent soldiers in the military to deliver a few gut shots to the unarmed protesters. However, when these soldiers meet the protesters, they're met by a bat, aka a battle android trooper. Remember, we saw Duke struggling to defeat just one of these androids, and now all the bats are powered by Energon, so they're even more dangerous than before. The soldiers let out a wave of firepower on the bat here, and see, it does nothing at all. Then they're pissing in their boots when they see an entire army of bats in the sky above flying in. Now, when the Prime Minister receives a report from one of his subordinates that the soldiers are in a firefight with machines, he quickly realizes Destro is behind it and asks for a direct line to him. The reason why he knows this is Destro is because there seems to be an already established familiarity between the two that has to do with Destro's family ties to Darklonia, and we'll get into that soon. After the battle android troopers take out the Darklonian troops and breach the Prime Minister's palace, the protesters take this as a sign that the bats are on their side and go to join them in breaching the palace. But when one of the androids sees them, they annihilate them right on the spot. Now, this wasn't ordered by Destro. It's revealing an issue he's having with the bats that we'll learn about soon. In the meantime, the Prime Minister contacts Destro, and Destro tells him, "You're stepping down." The Prime Minister is confused by this sudden attack by Destro because he asks himself, since when did Destro, a rich and powerful businessman, care about the politics and people of Darklonia? At that moment, Destro and his men show up, and he answers the Prime Minister's question. He says, the moment it could turn a profit. Now, that's actually not entirely true. There's also a bit of him taking care of a personal vendetta here, because Destro tells the Prime Minister that his clan has deep family connections with the family that founded and named Darklonia, and announces they will rule here again. He says, my cousin Artyom Darklon will take over as Prime Minister, so get out of his chair. One thing I should point out here is that we don't learn how exactly the Darklons lost their rulership of Darklonia. This is cool because this is Skybound and Dan Waters, who's the writer behind this series, establishing the Destro family early on instead of later, and drawing inspiration from the Marvel G.I. Joe comics run, because the fictional European country Darklonia and Destro's cousin, only known as Darklon then, first appeared in issue 88 of the Marvel G.I. Joe comics, where Darklon ruled Darklonia with an iron fist and had the country serve as a hub for illegal weapons manufacturing and distribution, often supplying various factions including Cobra. Unlike Destro, Darklon was a cunning businessman rather than a military leader who had a sense of honor. The guy was only motivated by profits, showing how cruel he could be, and though he was loyal to Destro, ultimately he only cared about his financial interests. As we go through this series, we'll see the personality traits Artyom Darklon shares with his Marvel counterpart. You may have noticed he doesn't have a family mask design like his Marvel counterpart. All I'll say is, by the end of the video, he will, and it's wild how it happens. Even though the people were literally protesting on his front door, the Prime Minister tries to argue that the people won't stand for a blood-soaked mercenary taking his place because they love him. Destro responds, "Yeah, that would have been the case, until you secretly took money from the crisis fund, and when Darklonia faced a drought, the people's crops failed and there was no money to save them. And when some people started rebelling, you burned them at the stake to silence them." Destro, smiling, goes on to say, "I'm tempted to discover what they will do with you if we let you walk out of the palace gates. I suspect they'll find new, innovative ways to hurt you." The Prime Minister replies, "I hope to see you in hell, Laird Destro." He takes his gun and shoots himself right in the head. Destro has taken Darklonia. Now, this is just the beginning of the chaos that's going to ensue in this series. It's going to be a mix of Captain America the Winter Soldier meets the Terminator. Okay, so even though Destro and Cobra Commander are officially working together, just like their animated counterparts, they have disagreements. And you'll see they don't trust each other completely. Cobra Commander contacts Destro and informs him that he's disappointed he's wasting resources like the Energon he provided him and the bats on personal vendettas like conquering what he calls backwater nations without discussing it with him. Destro explains part of the reason why he used the bats was to test them, and the issue he's having with them that I mentioned earlier, he reveals to Cobra Commander, which is they shoot anything with a face. They aren't able to distinguish friend from foe. This further displeases Cobra Commander, and he points out that they're essentially useless then, because they cannot be deployed alongside Cobra troops. What he says next shows us that he isn't gung-ho about revealing Cobra to the world just yet. He's playing the slow game of amassing forces and weapons and creating plans. He says, "We're still amassing the army of Cobra. We must remain in the shadows. What you have done has brought international eyes to our operation." Destro replies, "My operation. I've run M.A.R.S, not Cobra. We're in business together. I will build your machines and work with you towards your goal, but I am not your subordinate. Remember that." He then cuts the communication feed. Notice that Destro said your goal, making it clear that he's only working with him as long as he continues to provide Energon. Now we learn what Destro's true goal is, because we go to him sometime later in the Scottish Highlands, traversing through the snow. Reminds me of Batman Begins. In his inner monologue, he talks about how human warfare has evolved so much over the centuries. But now that Energon exists, that will greatly accelerate it even more. He arrives at this hidden fortress, which turns out to be a huge mausoleum that is his ancestral home, and it's so cool. We see statues of the Destros that came before him. Later, we'll get into his family history and the origin of the Steel Mask in the Energon universe. Now, there being a mausoleum of statues of Destros that came before, I think this is something new Dan Watters added to the Destro mythos. The other thing here, which I'm pretty sure is new, is Destro having a spiritual connection to his ancestors, where he can speak to them. You'll see what I mean. He speaks to the statues, promising his ancestors that Clan Destro will stand at the forefront of the great change Energon will bring to the world of war. That Cobra Commander believes since he is the only one in control of Energon, he can fold M.A.R.S into Cobra. Destro makes it clear to his ancestors that he won't let that happen. He says, "None of you and no Destro who came before bent to another's will, and I will not be the first. So I seek your wisdom, ancestors. Counsel me with the insight that has shaped it through history by crafting and distributing the arms of war." Now, it's not revealed to us what his ancestors say to him, but they definitely say something, because Destro just says, "Yes, yes, of course." A few weeks later in Darklonia, Artyom Darklon is now in power, and Destro has wasted no time in turning Darklonia into a hub for illegal weapons, because Artyom is hosting here what he announces is the biannual Security Innovation Defense Expo, which is a fancy title to hide the fact it's an illegal arms fair. He tells the various nations and organizations that are here that there is a need to be discreet, since they are still waiting for their new government's legitimacy to be recognized by various international powers. This event officially does not exist and isn't taking place. Now, this is where a human character from the G1 Transformer series makes their appearance, and how Dan Waters utilizes this character is amazing. At this M.A.R.S fair, you have other companies in the arms or tech business. One of these companies here is Hybrid Technologies. Destro welcomes its new CEO, Astoria Carlton Ritz, who first appeared in the G1 cartoon episode, The Girl Who Loved Powerglide. In that episode, she was a spoiled brat who inherited her father's company after he passed away, who liked to party all the time and had this crazy ability in the episode to jinx any tech she came in contact with. The reason why I say how Dan Waters uses her in this series is amazing is because she's such an obscure character that really nobody cared about. But the way he takes that character, implements her in this series, and that ability she had is super well done. You're gonna see what I mean. Going on a quick tangent though, the one thing that happened in that episode that was actually hilarious is she tried to like grab Powerglide after he saved her from the Decepticons, saying like, I wanna fly again, being her bratty self, and Powerglide was like, get off me, ho, throwing her into the ground. Now, like her G1 cartoon counterpart, Astoria has become the CEO of Hybrid Technologies after her father's death. This other character named Farouk, who originates from the British G.I. Joe comics Action Force, where he had a business relationship with Destro and worked for Cobra for a time. He's really not important in this story, but he asked Destro about the rumor going around that he has automated mechanical soldiers. Destro plays it coy and only answers that he's been listening to too much gossip. Though he literally used them to conquer a country, he doesn't want his competitors to know he possesses such advanced weaponry or Energon. Now, the reason why he's hosting this illegal arms fair and invited his competitors gets revealed here, because Mercer pulls him away and reports they investigated the companies and their latest projects. Mercer tells him one of them is working on the development of ionic weaponry, and another claims to have advancements in nanotech, but none of them seem to have or have access to Energon. This is Destro making sure he's the only company that has access to Energon. However, there is one company that didn't show up to the fair that Destro is worried about. That company is Extensive Enterprises, which is run by the Crimson Twins, Tomax and Xamot, who are currently in South America. Though they're mirror image identical twins, how you can tell them apart is that Xamot has a scar on his cheek, whereas Tomax is scar-free. Not only do they run a successful company, but they also operate one of the largest private armies called the Crimson Guard. Now we get an example here of how ruthless these twins can be. They had to show up here after the local military field commander disastrously failed holding back a guerrilla cell that attacked their encampment. Instead of holding his position until the Crimson Guard got there to reinforce him, he chose to flee. The commander tries to argue it's their failure for not taking out the guerrilla cell before they reach their position, and that they promised to have every possibility covered. The twins respond, they promise nothing. They're hired to consult and provide manpower. That had he held his position, he would have lost only 20% of his men, and for his tactical failure, he and his men will have to be punished. They already discussed it with his general. They say every battalion has to understand failure isn't an option. The twins have the Crimson Guard wipe out the commander's troops. Just bullet fire and bodies everywhere. Xamot then strangles the field commander with a garrote wire until he snaps this guy's neck. Like holy hell. Tomax speaks with the general about replacing the lost soldiers with the Crimson Guardsmen. Meanwhile, in Darklonia, an army of mysterious drones show up at the arms fair and start dropping bombs everywhere. Now, Destro's foot soldiers, who are called Iron Grenaders, This is our first time seeing them in action. They hop on their aircrafts, which are called despoilers. They begin destroying the drones. Astoria's crazy self is admiring the destruction. One of the missiles from the sky almost drops on top of her until Destro pushes her out of the way. Luckily for both of them, the missile turned out to be a dud. After Destro realizes it's a dud, he smiles and says, "It would appear that I am at war." Here's the thing, sometime later, Destro has concluded that Tomax and Xamot are the ones who were behind the attack on the fair, because their company is his biggest competitor, and with him out of the way, they could monopolize the military-industrial complex. So he's determined to raze them and their company to the ground and salt the earth. However, Tomax and Xamot believe that Destro is the one behind the attack on his own fair, so he could frame them because that would make every company and nation go against ever hiring their Crimson Guard ever again. So they're determined to destroy him. Both companies declare war on each other. M.A.R.S has the superior firepower, and Extensive Enterprises has the superior manpower. Unbeknownst to both of them though, there is a third player that we'll find out about soon. As the war begins between these two groups, we do get a quick origin explanation of Tomax and Xamot from Destro's perspective of the war. He explains that they received their nickname, the Crimson Twins, because of a Time magazine article that hailed them as wizards of the stock market. However, what the outside world doesn't know, except those in the arms industry, is that via a complex network of shell companies, they operate one of the largest private armies in the world. They believe that war is an unavoidable part of doing business. They find the most ambitious and gifted individuals, a mixture of ruthless businessmen who they train to be ruthless mercenaries, and ruthless soldiers they train to be ruthless businessmen. Destro bombs one of their training facilities in Belarus. At the same time, we get Tomax and Xamot's point of view on Destro. They explain that he has always been an innovative and lucrative weapons designer, that he believes business is just a means to wage war. They admit that when they moved into his realm of the military-industrial complex, they modeled certain elements of their company after his. So they always kept a close eye on his company's cash flow, and noticed recently it's been tied up at a site in South Carolina. They have sent their Crimson Guard, who are currently bombing the facility building his battle android troopers. At that moment, Destro receives a report of this and orders all the bats to be activated, even the ones in the early stages of development, because the facility contains his primary store of Energon, and doesn't want the twins to find out about it. He needs to guarantee that there won't be any witnesses. The Crimson Guard unit here reports that they bombed the facility, but then they're swarmed by bats. Even though they're damaged by the bombing of the facility, that hasn't stopped them. Some have no arms or no legs or one arm, but it doesn't stop them at all from completely dominating and killing the Crimson Guard here. The Crimson Twins respond to Destro's attack on their training ground by activating the Assault System Pod. They destroy the squadron of Iron Grenadiers Destro sent. Destro is shocked to see that the twins got the design of his anti-aircraft pod. Even though they don't discover the Energon, the twins see that the rumors are true. Destro has mechanical soldiers. After both initiated their first strikes on each other, Destro and the twins decide to meet at this neutral location Destro has chosen called the Scrap Heap of Empires. I actually love this scene here. Destro explains to the twins that it's a no man's land, a landfill of weapons no longer fit for use that the world's governments swept under the rug by a mutual silent agreement. That if they continue their war, they risk turning the world into such a graveyard. The twins argue that he wants a ceasefire after he's the one who started the war, and Destro gets pissed because in his mind, they're denying being the ones behind the attack on his life. He says, "You lie even to my face. I'm going to kill you both. I'm going to put your heads on spikes." They pull their guns on him, but Destro makes it clear he is a man of his word and won't do anything today. They don't believe him, and what Destro reveals to them is one of the reasons why I freaking love this guy. He explains to them that the US government has lost 6 nuclear warheads since 1950 through various accidents. That the US government has an idea where all of them are, but believe they are unrecoverable. He says they are wrong. A few years ago, I made it a personal project to have them all retrieved. One is targeted at these coordinates right now. The twins think he's bluffing, but Destro dares them to shoot, and they'll see he isn't. He proposes they continue their war, but don't destroy each other's companies and the people that work for them, and just focus on killing each other. Whoever wins absorbs the loser's company, which the twins ultimately agree to. Later, Destro returns to the Scottish Highlands, and the interesting thing we learn about is the existence and location of the tomb of Destro's ancestors is only known by those who come from Clan Destro. He doesn't even tell the people that work for him. Nobody knows about it. He purposely comes here with minimal equipment, so nothing can be triangulated. However, Destro doesn't know he's been followed here by an assassin named Chameleon. After he leaves his ancestor's tomb, Destro discovers Chameleon and confronts the assassin. Destro is cocky and confident, and I love it, even though Chameleon literally has a rifle trained on him. He says, "To ensure these coordinates are forgotten, I will scour the memory from the cerebral cortex of your corpse. I'll use steel wool." Chameleon responds just by straight up shooting him with her rifle. And at the same time, Destro tries to fire his wrist rockets, but it immediately fries and he gets hit by the bullet. She inspects the body thinking that Destro is dead, but the man is playing possum. He surprises her and reveals he wears a lot of Kevlar. As the two fight, he's trying to figure out how she took out both his rockets and his comms, theorizing to her that she must have tech that creates a localized EMP. Chameleon doesn't respond. Instead, she radios this individual named Overkill to send in backup. When Destro mentions that her name Chameleon is a pretty name, that he'll remember it after he kills her, Chameleon tells him to stop talking because he's making their fight to the death weird, kind of making fun of the nature of bad guys like Destro always gloating during a fight. Their fight becomes even more intense, and Destro says, "I am James McCullen Destro of the Destro clan. This is where my ancestors slumber, and I will not fall before them and shame them." Chameleon just replies, "Cool story, bro. Say it to my many terrifying drones." Destro makes a run for his despoiler, dodging the drone's attacks. He makes it, but when he flies off, Chameleon fries it. He ends up getting hit by one of the drone's rockets and crashes. Chameleon assumes he's dead, but he isn't. He survived. The story transitions to him explaining the origin of his family's mask to someone who is super important that we'll meet soon. God, it's so good. He explains that during the Wars of the Three Kingdoms that began in 1639 and went on for 14 years, his ancestor, Laird Destro, sold weapons to all sides of the war. The Irish, the Scottish, and the eventual victor, Oliver Cromwell, who became Lord Protector of England. Cromwell's soldiers had a reputation for putting Irish babies up on their pikes and burning churches their enemies sought sanctuary within. It was Cromwell's men who discovered Destro's betrayal. They called him a traitor, whereas Destro called himself an entrepreneur. While imprisoned, he said to one of Cromwell's men, "If you execute me, whose weapons will you use to do so? And once I am gone, whom will Cromwell buy his weapons from? Will you be the one to tell him the flow of muskets and cannonballs has halted, and why?" Cromwell's man knew he was right. However, he replied, "You think yourself untouchable? Perhaps you are right that I cannot provide you the death you deserve. But your sin shall be known. You shall wear a crown smelted from your shame, and from the musket balls you provided, dug up from the bodies of good men they killed. You shall wear it forever." He placed the hot iron mask on Destro's face as he screamed. Now, Dan Waters is retaining the same origin Larry Hama did in the Marvel G.I. Joe comics, except adding the gruesome twist of the Iron Mask being burned into his ancestor's face. However, this isn't an original twist, because online it seems like everyone is forgetting that the G.I. Joe Rise of Cobra film did this already. Which I know that movie didn't do a lot of great things, but that was a cool addition to Destro's character they created. Now, the comic origin of how the family mask came to be differs greatly from the OG G.I. Joe series. In the episode Skeletons in the Closet, Destro explained that the origin of the family mask began when one of his ancestors long ago was convicted of witchcraft. He was forced to wear an iron mask for the rest of his life. The descendants of the Destro clan were so angered by that punishment that they vowed to fight the forces of law and order forever, every one of them wearing an iron mask until law was eradicated. Destro says, "They thought to shame a Destro through discomfort, as though discomfort is not a weaponeer's stock in trade. We dance in the gray spaces between international laws. We refuse to look away from the devastation of our wares, which turns the stomachs of a world that finds it all so necessary, yet impolite. Our clan took that melded mask of shame, and it became the symbol of our pride, that we can carry such weight, that we can thrive within it. And God, how we thrive. Yesterday I was shot with a bullet and rockets, but I did not have time to die." Still under the impression that Chameleon was sent by the Crimson Twins, he goes on to explain after surviving the attack, he knew he couldn't return to Mars, because if the twins knew about his most secret place, somebody in his inner circle then has betrayed him, which means all his facilities and safe houses are compromised. So he let the world believe he was dead and traveled to the Air Force Base in Scotland and had them take him into custody by confessing war crimes to them. It's such a genius move by Destro. He says, "I asked to speak to you. They laughed at first, but when they ran it up the chain, they stopped laughing. And here you are at my beck and call." This person replies, "What do you want, Destro? Give me one reason why I shouldn't extradite you to a black site where we can really test your theories of discomfort." Now this is where Destro gives a similar speech his ancestor gave, and it perfectly displays how much power and influence this guy has. He says, "Oh please, whose aircraft would you use to do so? And once I'm gone, whose weapons would the president buy from? Will you be the one to tell him the flow of machine guns and tanks has halted? And why? If Mars is dismantled or falls into hands unwilling to supply your nation, what happens when the next war begins? And with America defenseless, a war will begin, won't it? General Flag." Flag replies, "Okay, Destro, I'm listening." So there are two major revelations here. One, General Flag going out of his way to meet Destro is crazy because he is the man who runs the US military. If he wanted to disband and deactivate G.I. Joe, he could do it with the snap of his fingers. That's how much pull and power this guy has. So the fact that he's folding to Destro here is wild. Two, this discussion has revealed to us that the US government's main source of weapons is M.A.R.S. Industries. Now, 8 days go by, and with the world believing Destro is gone, the Crimson Twins make their move to take over M.A.R.S. They meet with Artyom Darklon, because he is now acting CEO of M.A.R.S. Industries, along with being the president-elect of Darklonia. So the twins point out to him that it doesn't look good that a world leader is also running the world's biggest private weapons manufacturer. They suggest he sell the company to them, but Artyom initially refuses because his clan has owned M.A.R.S. for centuries, until they give him a paycheck with a lot of zeros on it. So many, in fact, that Tomax mentions that Zamon's hand cramped from writing all those zeros. More than likely, they offered him billions for the company. And just like his Marvel counterpart, all he cares about is the money. So he accepts their check and hands over M.A.R.S. to the Crimson Twins. Transitioning back to Destro, we get another example of how much power this guy has over the US government. Because for a week, he's been reading files that he received from General Flag that contain every dirty little secret and every military operation they have. The file that interested him the most was the one about Duke's encounter with Starscream. The biggest revelation that comes from this is pretty crazy, because though the government chose to cover up the incident by calling it an accident and tried to prevent Duke from investigating it further, they did believe him. Behind the scenes, they scrambled to discover who on Earth was working on similar tech. so they secretly had the CIA infiltrate American companies to steal industrial secrets. One of the companies listed that they suspected catches Destro's attention: Hybrid Technologies. The funny thing that happens next shows us Destro kind of sticking the knife to General Flag, being a dick really, and showing how arrogant he is. He sends Flag flowers with a note thanking him for the files and granting him safe passage and full immunity to the United States. That he's looking forward to many more years of profitable partnership between Mars and the US military. Make no mistake, General Flag isn't happy about this. He's hoping he made the right decision. Private Ferez here hits Flag with the famous idiom, "better the devil you know," right? Flag replies, "Sometimes it's hard to be certain, Private. Sometimes the devil is just the devil." From here we go to Astoria, who, like her G1 counterpart, is throwing a lavish party. Destro shows up, rocking a kind of pimp daddy-ish outfit, which totally fits him. He asks Astoria for a private meeting, and she answers that she has a meeting room upstairs, but she needs to powder her nose real quick, and will meet him shortly. However, she immediately tries to make a run for it. She makes it outside, and Scrap Iron on the rooftop above fires a rocket at her. Astoria neutralizes the missile with an EMP blast, revealing what Destro figured out about her, that she is Chameleon. This is where we get down to the nitty-gritty of who the third player is that's orchestrated Destro and the Crimson Twins going to war. Destro approaches Astoria and explains that he knew her father, that before he died he made her CEO of Hybrid Technologies. He would have never have done that unless she was capable, because he was a ruthless and practical man. That her codename Chameleon is appropriate, playing the party girl in the day and behind the scenes wearing a wig and goggles being the assassin Chameleon. Now she immediately goes on the offensive attacking him, but Destro tells her to just stop because her EMP won't stop a bullet. He theorizes the tech she possesses is from her father, which Astoria admits is the case and says it's called a fluke pulse. He created it to protect me. Destro accuses her of being the one behind the attack on the fair and causing the war between him and the twins. When Astoria says that it wasn't her, Destro is like, "You tried to assassinate me in the Highlands." And Astoria replies, "Okay, that time I tried to kill you." She reveals that she only did that because she thought he knew about this project called Overkill. She explains that it was a project she and her father were secretly working on, away from the greedy eyes of their company's board that seemed like a pipe dream. However, after her father died, an anonymous donor who somehow knew about their secret project reached out and wished to become a silent partner in it. She discloses it's a project focused on creating a fully autonomous, automated global defense system meant to end war and bring world peace. An artificial intelligence capable of learning, identifying potential threats, and nullifying them before they materialize worldwide. I know I said earlier this story is a mixture of Captain America the Winter Soldier meets the Terminator, but really it's the Winter Soldier meets Avengers Age of Ultron, because Astoria and her father secretly working on creating Overkill is the same as Tony Stark and Dr. Banner secretly working on the AI Ultron, trying to create a global defense system around the world that would keep potential threats to Earth at bay. However, Astoria and her father's AI Overkill's main purpose is more like Arnim Zola's program Hydra wanted to implement in Winter Soldier, an algorithm that would analyze people's past to determine if they would be a potential threat in the future. If they were deemed a potential threat, the S.H.I.E.L.D. helicarriers that would be placed around the world would neutralize them. Now, just like how Ultron woke up, the same eventually happened to Overkill, because Astoria says it wasn't ready yet, but then it woke up. And being autonomous, capable of learning and improvising, it since refused to go back to sleep. It was Overkill who identified the Darklonia arms fair as a threat. It was Overkill who attacked it without my permission. It's still working with me for the most part, but Overkill is making its own decisions about how to end war on Earth. Destro astutely deduces that she sounds afraid of it. When he asks, "Where is it?" Astoria answers, "Watching us. Always watching us." We see Overkill is a satellite orbiting Earth. Destro smiles and says, "Fascinating." We're going to transition to sometime later with the Crimson Twins haven't taken over Mars completely. They've gone through Destro's deepest files and found out about Energon, and found one of his contacts they have arranged to meet with, who arrives at Mars. The twins say, "Welcome to Mars, Cobra Commander." Now, the twins give the commander a tour of the Mars facility, and one of the changes they tell him they've made to Destro's company is getting rid of the bats by putting them in the basement because they consider them a failure, using that as an example of what they're saying was Destro's inefficient use of Energon. They promise the commander if he's willing to continue to supply Mars with Energon, they'll use it more fiscally efficient than Destro did. And here comes my favorite part. Because when the twins walk into Destro's office with the commander, sitting on his throne waiting for them is Destro, who hits them with a cold line. He says, "Sorry to disappoint you, gentlemen, but Daddy is home." At that moment, Scrap Iron hits the front entrance of the building with a rocket launcher. The Crimson Guard respond using the Hiss tanks, but Chameleon immediately puts them out of commission. The Crimson soldiers can't get out of the tank and end up being burnt to death. Destro asks Cobra Commander if he's allied with the Crimson Twins, and the commander plays it coy. He answers that he's keeping his options open and points out that the twins are offering Cobra loyalty and financing for foot soldiers, whereas his bats are useless. The twins interrupt the conversation, reminding Destro they promised to kill him, and they want to do it with their bare hands. They take the fight to Destro, who dodges their attack and lands a blow on Tomax. When both Tomax and Xamot stumble from the blow, Destro mentions that the rumors of them feeling each other's pain are true, which shows us they have a symbiotic bond. The Crimson Guard realize the tanks are all disabled and run to grab weapons, but my boy Mercer, hidden and disguised as one of them, gets to them before the rest of the guard does and freaking unloads on them. Chameleon joins in, sniping them from above. The Crimson Guard runs to the basement to regroup. As that's going on, Destro is beating the twins' asses and trash talking at the same time, pointing out that with just 3 soldiers, he's taking out their Crimson Guard. Tomax successfully gets his garrote around Destro's neck, but luckily, Destro was able to get his hand in there before Tomax can tighten it around his neck. As they are fighting, Cobra Commander is just standing there, watching this fight go down, waiting to see who comes out on top. The twins gloat about how this is the end of the Destro clan and that it was inevitable. At that moment, Destro activates his bats in the basement, and they wipe out the Crimson Guard there. Overkill, with its drones, kills the remaining guards outside the M.A.R.S facility that managed to escape. When the twins continue to gloat and tell Destro he ran away, Destro responds that he was traveling, and in his travels, he's learned about robots that turn into fighter jets, Energon opening the doors to new tech, and an AI defense system called Overkill. Overkill has its drones fire into Destro's office, which frees Destro from the twins' grasp. He chases the twins and starts beating them down while saying, "I don't think it likes you. I don't like you. You tried to take Mars from me? I am Laird Destro, and you are in my house. And here, in my house, I forgive you." He has Chameleon call off Overkill. He explains to the twins that life is war and everyone has the desire for power, so he doesn't blame them for seeking more power, wanting what he has. That new things are emerging in the world, and some are not even from this world. Things that would make them and their art of war obsolete. And that Cobra Commander is right, they need to unite under Cobra to keep the world in a state of perpetual war. Cobra Commander says, "You have impressed me today, Destro." Destro replies, "Thank you, Commander. I look forward to working with you all. But for now, get the hell out of my building." Now, this might seem abrupt and not make sense, but there's a reason why Destro chose to do this. He's playing the long game. You'll see what I mean in a second here. One thing I have to point out here that I know some of you are thinking is, why didn't Overkill, since it is thinking on its own, and its main goal is to end war on Earth, didn't take this opportunity to neutralize Cobra Commander, Destro, and the Crimson Twins, who have plans to bring war all over Earth? I honestly couldn't tell you. Kind of a plot hole. Now, some time goes by and Astoria asks Destro when she'll meet Cobra Commander, but he points out to her that she may have already met him, because he thinks her anonymous benefactor was him. He tells her that he doesn't trust the Commander or Overkill. He fires one of his nukes into the sky toward Overkill, officially destroying the system. Astoria agrees with it and thinks it's for the best. She thanks him and the two of them kiss. So Destro and Astoria might be a couple, or maybe messing around. Either way, this could confirm M.A.R.S and hybrid technologies are officially partners. From here we go to an epilogue. The first place we go to is Destro and Artyom in the tomb of the Destro clan. This is where we get another of Destro's true goals. And this is what I meant by he's playing the long game. Artyom apologizes for selling M.A.R.S to the twins and tries to save himself by pointing out it all worked out in the end, right? When he asks Destro if they'll work now towards common goals with the Crimson Twins and Cobra Commander, Destro answers, "Please, we will let the Commander build, and when the time is right, I will instate myself as leader of Cobra." Artyom assures him that he'll have his full support and the full backing of Darklonia when he does this, since they're family after all. Destro replies, "Are we? You don't hear our ancestors. And when was the last time you wore your family mask to honor them?" As Artyom is stumbling over his words trying to get a response out, Destro pulls out a scorching hot mask of the Darklon's design and says, "You tried to sell our company after I gave you a country. You will atone." Mercer and Scrap Ryan grabs Artyom as he tries to beg Destro to stop, but that's not happening. Destro places the scorching hot mask on his face as he screams. In this final part of this epilogue, we go to Cobra headquarters. After Destro destroyed the Overkill satellite, a Cobra trooper reports it to the Commander. What's kind of funny is that the trooper says, "Your prediction was right. He nuked the satellite to impress a woman." He then reports that something else is entering Earth's atmosphere above the Pacific Ocean, made of an alloy that their scans can't identify, but appears to be organic in nature. Cobra Commander says, "Oh Cybertron, have you sent me more gifts?" So the end of this series takes place at the same time Optimus Prime is falling with a piece of Cybertron into Earth's atmosphere after he destroyed Shockwave's Energon tanks along with the space bridge. Well, that is the end of the Destro miniseries, another long one. If you've made it to the end of the video, thank you so much for watching. I greatly appreciate it. Please comment below your thoughts and subscribe to the channel. Consider becoming a channel member. Other than that, have an awesome day, and always remember every day to go beyond.